on his way to the gold medal in the 10,000 meters. In that race, Lassie Viren smashed the world record. Look that up if you don't. How's a guy like me who loves mental toughness still talking about it 50 years later? Scenario planning is much more than just occasionally thinking about some what-ifs in the game. You have to think about your own triggers and the things that might happen. Some things going really, really well, some things not so well. Why would you need to scenario plan something going well? I see some baseball coaches here. You know this already. What type of goals do sometimes come into the mind as a player, when you have a guy that's on the verge of a no-hitter? It goes from a pursuit goal to an avoidance goal sometimes. I really want to avoid losing this opportunity for history. Pursuit goals keep us strong, aggressive, confident. Avoidance goals make us weak. They second guess. There's a threat response in the mind. And anytime there's a threat response in the mind, there's a physiological response to that stress they obviously call, we've all heard the term, the fight or flight reaction. So you want to be able to scenario plan when things go extremely well. So someone's not thinking, oh man, I don't want to ruin a really good thing here. That's a scenario plan. It's a legit scenario that you need to actually get squared away. It's really important. So again, when we're talking about pre-competition preparation and focus, it's not quite as simple as it first reads. That's just like someone that seems to be kind of, use the cliche, get ready. I hate cliches in sports. He was just locked into play. Please. Was he really? Then what type of scenarios did he plan? How well does he know the strengths and areas of improvement of the team he's actually playing against? How well has he studied that? What kind of time has he given to film outside of mandatory practice? All right, 5 and 6. Ability to push through fatigue and positive pain. Positive pain, obviously, is just fatigue and discomfort. I don't give a crap about that. I do care about players' feelings, but not in this area. You suck it up. You're a college athlete. You push through. You grit it out. It's David Goggins who's going to carry the friggin' boats. Blah, 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 blah. But I'm a mean cuss when it comes to that. But negative pain, I'm very sensitive to. Very sensitive to. That's the type of pain where it's probably going to lead to injury. Maybe cost a young man, young woman their season or maybe career. Very sensitive to that. But their ability to put through positive pain and fatigue, and you've got some players that are willing just to get more cuts in the cage than others. You've got some individuals that will just give it up in the weight room more than others. I see athletics and track coaching. You've got some players outside of mandatory practice that would just do so much more than others. They have to be able to grade that and have an honest discussion. I said this earlier on that I don't respect teams that you can't say that you're interested in a championship if you're not going to score high in this category here. What are you doing outside of mandatory practice? Because as we all know, the components of championship, chasing championships is, for power-centric sports, is not just physical skill development. It's not just running form or the form of the discus or the javelin or the pole vault. It's speed, agility, quickness. It's strength, it's power development. It's local muscular endurance. It's nutrition, it's rest and regeneration. It's self-myofascial release on a foam roller that don't feel good. It hurts to actually foam roll correctly. Even getting a foam roller and you have to support yourself on that thing, it actually takes, it's like almost like a freaking core workout, man. If you're doing that right. It takes extreme discipline and commitment. And I want players to understand truly where they're at so they can stop being so delusional. So when they put their hands in, 1, 2, 3, win. 1, 2, 3, championship. I'm like, please. I said this earlier on with the athletes. I'd much prefer they put their hands in and say, 1, 2, 3, let's try to be one game over 500. Right? It ain't sexy, but it's honest. Versus those teams that are pretending they're actually chasing championships. Or they're pretending to say, coach, I want to be a great player. Do you really? Tell me what you think that entails, young man. I love that goal for you, but tell me what you think it entails. And then getting their response and how they should really score themselves in this category. Category 7, poise in practice versus competition. In baseball, there's a term, translate this to each of your respective sports, called white line syndrome. Baseball coaches already know what this means. You step across the white line for competition, you ain't the same dude. You ain't the same dude. That swing that looks so smooth and effortless in practice now looks labored and robotic, and something's off. The timing and tempo of that. And what do? Make the huge mistake. We try to make adjustments to the swing. It's not necessarily the swing. How about that player truly be poised, so when he goes to the plate, he can play loose and free and clear and confident, aggressive. Now let's take a look at what the swing actually is really presenting itself as. Same thing for pitching. Translate that to each of your sports. A relaxed runner is a fast runner. Why one of the greatest track coaches of all time said what? To Carl Lewis and his running mate, and Leroy Burrell. Never run flat out in the final. Run at 96% of your intensity. Why? Because it's so hard to put the difference between 96 versus 100, that level of intensity. But psychologically, instead of muscling up, which slows runners down, exactly the same thing. A pitcher that tries to overly muscle up, they don't like the gun. All of a sudden, they start muscling up through a pitch, and good luck with that. What happens to location when that happens? What happens to the human body when that happens? What happens to consistency when that happens? What happens to trajectory and movement when that happens? So, they're poised in practice versus competition, focused in practice and competition. We probably will not today have a chance to get into channeling, how the human mind can actually focus, and the choice between the 7 different channels, and how to train our athletes to lock in with focus. We've got some other fish to fry today. This is an important area. 9 through 16. All right, 9. No description. No over describing this one. Performance consistency. Right. They might call themselves great because they've had that one great game, but how consistent are they? Versus blaming others. 12. You can be a leader, but just a negative leader. I mean, take your pick of politicians. Without me getting political, it's like you want to hear political judgment from me today. It's too polarizing. But depending on where you sit, which side of the aisle you sit, you'll probably be able to come up with a couple, 3 examples of leaders that are just terrible leaders. What do I mean by that? They were in a position of influence. So you're going to have a couple of athletes, unfortunately, and I hate this for you, but every now and again you're going to have a couple of athletes who there's a social hierarchy on every team. And you can have an athlete that's high in terms of social hierarchy. She's going to frickin' be a poisonous presence, and he's going to be a poisonous presence. They're leaders. They're impactful leaders. And forgive the gray area language, and I can say this because someone's son is not in the room right now. But the impact is shitty. It's terrible. It's awful. Are they impactful leaders? Yeah. Just negatively. So let's not get it twisted where people kind of grade their leadership ability on persuasion and their ability to direct others to do things, and that can be positive or negative. They may need a lot of hand-holding in this one, because a lot of people just lack self-awareness and think they're great leaders, but no, they're actually more of a poisonous presence. But this is going to be interesting because, at least with this category, you're going to get to see how they actually see themselves right now. To know exactly how self-aware they are or aren't. Overall work ethic, self-explanatory. Coachability. I'm simple. I think coachability is just 3 things on a superficial level. And that's what I do with my eyes. Either a verbal or physical assent. So if there's my coach and I'm the player, and I'm either giving the coach a non-verbal assent, or I got you, coach. Coach actually thinks, I think Spencer's got me, obviously. And then 3rd, hand on heart, level best effort to actually execute what coach is asking me to execute. I can do those 3 things. Basic eye contact. And I want to be careful here because I also learned, and it actually took professional baseball, where I was sent to some of the academies in Latin America to know from a cultural perspective, sometimes a lack of eye contact is actually a sign of respect, not disrespect. So cultural sensitivity should be, and any generalization means it's going to be unfair to certain human beings who don't subscribe to that, but it's important to be culturally aware. For some human beings, how they were raised in certain parts of Latin America and Asia, that it's actually respectful to look away when someone of authority and respect is actually giving you eye contact, is actually just say, yes, coach. And you're like, dude, look me in the eye. And it may not be how they were raised, and it was a sign of respect versus disrespect. But in general, eye contact, verbal or physical sent, and then an actual hand on heart, best effort to actually do that. And the reason why I like verbal or physical assent and not just eye contact and silence is because there's a massive difference between, check out the 2 eye contacts I've given my coach, first one, second one. First one, compliant, second one, USOB. You know, and that's just me being passive aggressive because I don't have the heart and the spine to actually say, coach, I just think you're a piece of crap. So I'm gonna be a coward, and I'm gonna be passive aggressive about it by giving you the eye contact you want and being passive aggressive. I'll show him. No, verbal or physical assent as well, and hand on heart, best effort to actually execute what the coach is asking. And these should be things that are teachable, coachable moments for us as coaches and trainers. Because if we're grading them, we don't just want to hand these things out. We want to be able to define what we would call a 9 versus a 2, what we would call a 5 in this, to actually give a little bit of an explanation. So this is potentially a very, very good team session just to increase their own self-awareness and actually start some really good conversations. 15, intensity in practice versus competition. You know why this is on here, because it's very easy to get excited about game day, and if it's 5:30 in the morning on a cold Minnesota overcast with a little bit of rain and flecks of snow, ain't quite as much fun now, is it? So we'll see what this is like in practice versus competition, and this is huge. Last but not least, confidence in practice versus competition. And with the athletes, I spoke about quality confidence versus ordinary confidence. Definition of the two, your athlete should be hearing this from you. Ordinary confidence goes up and down like a roller coaster, based on performance in baseball / line for position player, or for a pitcher, ERA, FIP. It's going up and down based on the last couple of outings. Translate this to each of your sports. You know, you run the 100, your best is a 10-3 of all time, and you see 10-4-6, something's wrong, something's off, something's broken, I'm no longer fast, I've lost my fitness, blah, 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 blah. Quality confidence is robust. It does not dip. It takes a lot for quality confidence to dip. So why would a player have quality confidence versus ordinary? Because the players who have a quality confidence, they have a knowing that even though sometimes physically we don't execute, mentally they actually have these skills in their back pocket to be at their best when it counts the most. That puts rocket fuel into your confidence. That gives you a knowing. So you might say, if I had that knowing, then why the heck am I dipping? Physically dipping. It's easy for baseball. It's the easiest answer. Now translate this to each of your own sports. Very easy. What if I go 4 games and I haven't had a hit? I could be making hard contact for 2 of those 4 games where I'm just playing great. I might have clutch hits all day long, just really unlucky. And then the other 2 games you might say, well, what happened there? Could have been some of the best pitching of the season. Right? So it's still advantage pitcher. If the pitcher is actually talented and brings his A game and has some of his best stuff all season, and it just unlucky happened to be against, his rotation and your team today, man, it's going to be a tough day. And that happens. That's baseball. It's tough. But I can be 0 for 4 and still have my best 4 games of the entire year. Not outcome based at all, but in terms of what I brought to the plate. Remember, clutch is all about the intentions we bring to the bump and bring to the plate. And clutch is all about the intentions we bring to the starting blocks. Always. That defines clutch. Got good news for the players. If you're clutch, not based on outcome, based on intentions you bring, your 4 C's. Were you composed? Were you concentrating? Were you confident? Were you commitment? You had commitment, then that play was clutch. Now, we don't always physically execute, despite we could be mentally perfect. We don't always physically execute. If you have a hard time with that, then good luck with perfectionism in your life. Right? And how can I prove that to you? How can I prove my little theory here? Because I can have you go through intermittent fasting in front of your peers as coaches, and then on day 3 of 2 days of intermittent fasting, I put a monster bowl of cereal, and I get 3 of your favorite boxes of cereal. You haven't eaten for 2 days. You could eat a lot of cereal. Big bowl, small spoon, and say, okay, your task in front of everyone is 500 spoonfuls of cereal. Now, if you're like me, it's been a long while since you've been fed, right? I mean, needed to be fed, is what I'm saying. Probably since you were 2 or 3. So the actual act of eating is not an anxiety-provoking thing for you. So you can be eating cereal, be fairly poised, fairly focused, fairly confident, like, okay, I've got to do that, I've got to do that, I'm hungry, 500, here we go. Despite being poised, focused, and confident, I guarantee you there was going to be a couple of spoons that's going to brush against your chin or something. Why? Because we're not physically perfect as human beings. We can be mentally perfect for a task, but physically not execute. It might only happen 1 out of every 100 spoonfuls. 5 times it's going to happen. There's going to be pitchers who lay an egg. Despite the fact that from time to time they didn't bring anything bad into the actual game, they weren't overly stressed, they didn't bring on heavy external expectations in their mind or self-imposed pressure. It's something that's similar in golf. The golf swing is an intricate thing. The drive phase for a sprinter is an intricate thing. That balance of perfect body angle. It's not going to be executed every single time. The head's the heaviest part of the body. So during the drive phase, acceleration phase, maintenance phase, what the body does from its angle to its head position, really freaking important in sprinting. It's not going to be at that perfect to the millimeter angle every single time. We're flawed human beings. Do I have any good news at all? Of course I do. If you're clutch, the outcomes are typically going to be, and you're skilled, very, 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 very good. But not every time. And teaching players the fact that they're driving for intentions that go into place, not the actual outcome itself. Yes, they would like a good outcome, but what they're attaching to their self-worth, self-esteem is actually the idea of being clutch in the moment, being bigger than the moment. That's got nothing to do with outcome. But since they were this high, they've been watching nice Hollywood sports movies, which tell them clutch is, of course, interconnected with outcome. And it's not. It's a fallacious lie. And it's something that puts tons of self-imposed pressure on them. And you may have heard me speak to an athlete earlier on when he asked me that question. Remember, athletes do not fear outcomes. Now you're going to call BS on that. Give you a chance to defend it. They're deeply disappointed by certain outcomes. What they fear is how those outcomes are going to make them feel about themselves. I ain't that warrior. I ain't clutch. I ain't that dude. I ain't that dog. I'm a choker. Ego is protected second only to life preservation. We don't want those terms labeled on ourselves. We'll do anything to avoid that. So of course there's going to be a threat response if you think clutch is actually predicated on outcome, or outcome is predicated on clutch. Versus helping our athletes rewrite the definition of what is actually clutch versus not. There's times where a golfer may not execute a swing, not because something was wrong mentally. It's an intricate thing. Now, the more skilled you are, the lower the percentages. If you're mentally perfect, the lower the percentages that you won't physically execute. So some of the best pitchers in baseball may only have 1 out of every 10 outings, but that's the case at a major league level. And a college athlete, maybe that's 1 in 5. That's one. And there's no empirical evidence behind what I'm sharing in this part. I'm guessing. And the same thing for sports, for free throw shooting. I wasn't a great athlete. I played basketball, by the way, as a point guard. And I wasn't a great athlete. And you're gonna have to look this one up because you'll call BS on me very, very quickly when I say this. I didn't play a second in the NBA, which you shouldn't have to look up. That doesn't, you don't need to validate that, right? I can just tell you I didn't play a second in the NBA. And I played Division II, full scholarship D2. Played in Virginia. And I didn't have a ton of things that I did like, oh, so well, you're so awesome. But through my work on the mental game, I learned to shoot free throws really well. My field goal percentage was pretty darn good too. So in the middle of the year, I'm shooting 96.9 from the free throw line. What's that worth? That leads the United States of America. D1, D2, D3, NAIA, and JUCO. And there wasn't a single player in the NBA at the time shooting 96.9. I'm leading half the planet Earth from the free throw line. This little 5'8" guy from London, England. And why am I sharing that with you? To polish a medal in front of you on my chest? No. Is to talk about the fact that even though I was probably working harder on my mental game than any other player in college, certainly wasn't working harder on my physical game. I'd shoot 100 a day. Other players probably shooting more, but rain or shine, never missed, 100 a day. And I would have to make 96 out of 100, 1 miss out of every 25, or I'd have to do them over. And I made 100 straight over 27 times in my career, in practice. One day made 275 straight. Broke the record, Chris Jackson from LSU. These are facts. After my teammate told me that I was shooting 96.9, how do you think I shot the next game, guys?
Terrible.
Missed the first 2 consecutive free throws in my college career. Why? Because instead of going to the line, and I want you to hear this now, instead of going to the line with a primary objective of not, this was my normal thing, my primary objective is not to put the ball in the bucket. I say, what? That's exactly what you're trying to do. You're shooting a free throw. No, I want to put the ball in the bucket, not my primary objective. My primary objective, I want to step off that line saying, I completely dominated that moment. I had my body feeling the way I want to feel. That's my height number, my level of emotional arousal. I knew exactly where I needed to be. A 6.5 on a scale of 10. I know exactly how that feels, what my heart rate's doing, how I feel in terms of my nervousness or lack of nerves. At 6.5, I want the clearest image in my mind of that shot. And then I want to use my 2 favorite go-to phrases. I'm at my best when it counts the most, so smooth, so consistent. As I'm nodding to the referee to give me the bounce pass, I'm at my best when it counts the most, so smooth, so consistent. My mind hasn't time traveled at all to the score clock, what's on the line, and I'm occupying my mind right up to the point of actually, I'm at my best when it counts the most, so smooth, so consistent. Right up to the point of skill execution. Now, tertiary goal, third goal, is to put the ball in the bucket. But not my primary and secondary. So hit or miss, I can actually say, dude, you freaking stud. In that situation, you stud. Even if I miss, terribly disappointed. I'm not gonna lie, but not devastated. So I can come off saying, all right, physically didn't execute that. Happens every now and again. I'm a bit pissed. But you're a freaking stud. Why? Because how many human beings on planet Earth could have controlled their emotions and their focus and their imagery and their go-to words and not time traveled in that situation? You're going to count them on one hand or 2 hands. Do you know what that does to someone's self-esteem and confidence? That's what I'm talking about when it comes to attaching yourself and your self-worth to something very different than outcome. So I'm not fearing outcome. I'll be disappointed by outcome, but I don't fear it. What I fear is walking off that freaking line and not feeling like a stud. That's what I fear. And I can control that fully, whether I do or not. But after I'm told I'm shooting 96.9, I'm like, yeah, yes I am. And then an avoidance call creeps in. 1 miss, does that drop me to 2 in the country? For the first time that year, I start thinking about outcome. What happens? 2 bricks in a row. First 2 consecutive misses of my college career. So what do I do the following game? Forget about stats. If someone tells me, I'm going to say, hey, thanks for that, it's really encouraging, and immediately cut the cords to it and get right back to my primary objective, which is what? Wanting to come off that line feeling clutch. Good luck trying to get through 18 years of wiring with your young athletes to reverse that. That is a fist fight, man. That is a struggle. And they can, probably the smarter athletes will intellectually understand what I'm saying and emotionally reject it. I know the first time I came across that concept, and I'm pitching it to you in a slightly different way, but the first time I come across that concept, I struggled with it. It's like, nah, I've got to have something to control outcome. Got to give up control of that. If you do, you'll have one of the greatest outcomes if you practice hard in your sport, anywhere in the country, because athletes just don't think that way. It's all about what they attach their self-esteem. But when you feel like there's something attached to your self-esteem that you can't control based on outcome, and it's also predicated on opponent, there'll be a deep threat in your mind, and that threat response will lead to a physiological response. Those motor mechanics are not going to come out the same. I even have a hard time sometimes at the major league level getting players to understand that, versus every freaking analytics guy just rushing to like, now change this dude's mechanics. Leave him the heck alone. Just give me 3 days with him. Leave him alone, he's fine. He's not gone from a freaking all-star to a bum in 72 hours. Leave him alone. If after 3 days, he's not where he needs to be, you gotta have at it. But sometimes you need a lot of reps to actually know whether a motor pattern has actually got a hiccup to it. Not 1 game or 2 games. Something could be going on mentally, which is actually putting the body in a tight position, which means the timing and tempo of that swing, the timing and tempo of what his arms do and his legs, you know, the coordination through the kinetic chain, not going to be the same thing for a runner. It just ain't when the body's tight. And it's going to get that way when there's a threat response in the mind. Because if that athlete goes to the plate or is on the bump and in his mind it's like do or die, guess what's going to happen in a given baseball season? He's going to die many times. Very difficult to play at your best when that's the case. And I can tell you this, one of the greatest gifts you'll ever give your athletes, it will be setting them free, man. And they'll divide their career into two halves. Before they felt this and after they felt it. You can just set them free in this area. Almost liberating things. And actually enjoy their sport a lot more. So their confidence in practice versus competition. What I'm sharing with you is taking stuff out of the mind that doesn't belong there that helps with quality confidence. Can you just imagine? And I was far from the greatest basketball player. I was very careful to preface my comments with that. I didn't play a second in the NBA, man. I played for the Kings in Europe. I backed up 2 NBA guys. I was the backup to the backup. How about that? But if you knew me in high school, you'd probably say that kid had no business being a professional basketball player. You know, maybe a 8.5 out of 10 for my mind and what I did with it, and a 6 out of 10 for my body. And I'm not sandbagging myself too. I could one step jump back and grab the number 2 hat. I'm not an athletic slouch. But that's not NBA, under 6 feet, with an 8 Robinsons of the world. They're freaking special. I run 4.540. They're a 4.340. It's a massive difference, 0.2 of a second in the 40. So I'm not pretending to be this slouch of a guy and I'm being falsely humble. Could go a little bit, but at an NBA, under 6 feet. So I'm not trying to say some things that paint myself to be too high and mighty in what I was and what I wasn't. Last thing he wants is sports side trying to tell you how great he was, or it's not where my heart's at. But what I am trying to share is that I got a lot out of my mind because of how much I gave over to the game. And the interesting thing, I guarantee there are people practicing a lot more than me. But I actually was convinced at the time I was probably putting more into my mental game than any other college player in the country. I don't know what gave me that. I once heard Larry Bird say that he was convinced he shot more as an NBA player than any other NBA player when he was in his prime. And he couldn't empirically, he just had a sense that was the case. I always thought I put more into my mental game as a college athlete than any other college player in the country. I felt that. And I felt I could somehow justify that a little bit because the results were very different and how I was thinking was really different. Imagine going to the free throw line with a primary goal is not to put the ball in the bucket. Very different way of actually looking at skill execution, right? And what you actually attach to your self-worth. Something that's much more important than outcome. And outcome's critical. Critical at the college level. But not more important than that which I've described. It's elevating the win over the win. As in, of course, the cliche W-I-N, that what's important now versus win and outcome. Because it's the W-I-N that leads to the other time. Or at least the player performance of his or her potential. Okay. So once they have gone through this inventory, coaches, this would be your next task that I would recommend. This is something I've developed called the Take 2. Now, imagine they go through that inventory and they circle their top 2 or 3 strengths and they circle their top 2 or 3 areas of improvement. Their goal now is to do a daily Take 2. Their daily Take 2 does a couple of things. One is, you're supposed to write your top strengths and your top areas of improvement somewhere on the sheet and give yourself a grade for those. That way you're constantly aware of your strengths and areas of improvement. You're trying to work on them day in, day out. And then the second thing, you ask yourself these 2 questions. And you can play the practice over, play the game over. What would you have done differently? Question 2, if you could play the practice over, play the game over, what would you have done the same? But the twist is all your answers have to be broken down to everything that's mental related and then everything that's physical related. So physical related, of course, is going to be things that are mechanical. You know, you can look at a picture and his placement, on the rubber, his foot placement, and whether he feels like his arm is behind or in front of the pitch. You know, the timing and tempo of his lead foot for a hitter, what he's doing with his wrists, his elbows, his hip rotation, how his swing plane, all the mechanics. And translate that to each of your respective sports, all the mechanics. And then mentally, really important, what did he take into that competition? What did he actually take into that competition? What I mean by that mentally is we can only take 3 types of expectations. 2 of them are crap, we want to get out of the mind, but players take them in all the time. And 1 of them we want to embrace and go all in on. So which ones did he actually do a good job cutting the cords to and getting rid of and really focusing on the correct ones? Or did he unfortunately take, or she take, all 3? Or maybe worse still than that, take the wrong 2 in and nothing else. So what are the 3 expectations? You guys probably know this already, forgive me if this is redundant for some of you, but number 1, external expectations. Thinking about what is on the line relative to what others expect out of you. So I deal with this all the time for players trying to make that transition when they're at finishing school in baseball. Finishing school is AAA for those non-baseball coaches. They see that as finishing school for the major leagues. So they're knocking on the door, you're at AAA, and constantly thinking about being evaluated by front office, coaches, and everything they do is relative. Did this make my stock go up or did it make it go down? And remember, you can have heavy external expectations on a human being, but if they're not focused on it, it has no impact. So what type of crap are they taking into competition in their mind? Scouts pleasing coaches, pleasing teammates, pleasing parents, pleasing family members, and not because they're weak. They could just be good human beings. Good human beings like to make others happy and smile. If I played for you, I'd want to make you smile, man. I want you to be happy and proud of me and all those things. Hey, you're a good human being. Doesn't make you weak. But what value does it bring to my at-bat if I'm thinking about what coach is thinking about my at-bat? What possible value does it give me in the short amount of time for pitch recognition? To know whether I need to change it? It brings no freaking value whatsoever. Nothing at all. So we want to cut the cords to external expectations. That doesn't mean they stop being coachable by you. It means what they're taking into actual competition relative to expectations. That's not the same thing as tactics, by the way, in strategy. That's the outcomes of certain plays relative to external expectations. You've got some of your athletes that call home every now and again, and I'm glad that they do. I wish there were more love in the world with parents and caregivers. I do, I really do. And some of those parents and caregivers super well intentioned, but asking terrible questions. How'd it go today? What kind of a question is that? Seems innocent, right? How many points and assists you get? How'd you shoot from the field? Horrible questions. Well intentioned, horrible questions. Really horrible questions. I told the athletes about an Olympian that was fortunate enough to win gold medal for Team USA. And I worked with this guy in the Olympic trials and then went to Paris. So I did some work with Team USA swimming, and one of the swimmers I was assigned to was a guy, and our goal was for him when he touched the wall is to have a 10-second delay to actually look at the score, the time, the leaderboard. Because most swimmers do what you see it, or every single major company, yeah, exactly. They touch and it's straight up. Versus we were gauging his swim on 4 different components. One, what did he take into the green room, which is the ready room? That's when you just sit in a room before you're announced, you go out to your blocks and you just stare at your competition, best in the world, who's got the podium. What is he actually doing in terms of cutting the cords? 8 swimmers, but it's not a race. It's 8 people swimming at the same time. I wanted that to be his mentality. Because what does swimming his potential have to do with lane 1 versus 2 versus 7? Nothing. It's completely independent. And yet we get so wrapped up on, again, that threat response in the mind. Oh man, it's the world record holder here and who can I beat who? Versus what am I taking into competition? What kind of external expectations am I cutting the cords to? So a grade for the green, for the ready room. Next, what was in his mind in the blocks? The quality of his big routine. BIG, his breathing, his imagery, his go-to words. And there was a 4th component I won't get into today, which is his element, how he focused. It would take too long. It's called channeling. Do some research on it. Actually, don't do some research on it. It's my concept. There's some free articles on my website. Look that up. Do a deep dive on that. Channeling, it's important. How to get your guys to focus in the clutch. Really, really good stuff. Grading yourself on that. 3rd, what does he tell himself on the first turn? What were the actual words he used and were they believable? Were they positive and believable for him on the first turn? 4th, last 10 meters. What kind of effort He reached down to the marrow of his frickin' bones and he pulled out of the human spirit on the last 10 meters. Those are his grades. Once he gets those 4 scores, only then does he look up at the board. He's the only guy in the Olympic trials waiting those 10 seconds. 7 heads go up, he's evaluating, because he knows the conversation's coming after the win or lose, qualify or not qualify. He qualified by the skin of his freaking teeth, and then won gold in Paris. I'm not saying that was the reason. And by the way, incredible talent, incredible hard work, very nice person. I take 0.000000001 of that credit. All him. He also has to execute some of the things I'm encouraging him to do. All credit to him. So I want to make that clear. But doing the take 2 constantly gets to evaluate what he's taking into competition and what he's actually executing from a mental skill standpoint. Versus one of your players writing because they don't know any different. I felt confident, I didn't feel confident. That's at least a start, because they can start to recognize trends. Say, well, what was it that wasn't making you feel confident? I don't know, coach, you're just feeling a lot of pressure. Okay, as a coach now, you understand there are 3 types of expectations, right? External expectations, internal, that are all outcome-based, and internal, that are process mental-based. We want to kick 2 of them to the curb and focus on that 3rd. As I call it, we want to cut the cords of the crap we don't need to have in our mind. It is like coming out the blocks with 2 45-pound plates in a book bag, and it can work out too well. Take the bag off your shoulders, young man. Run free. We have to help them how to do that. So this gets them to evaluate that process. And out of this, one of the most beautiful words in all of sports will emerge for your athletes. It starts with a T. Trend. Trend. Where they'll actually get to see some of the things that are going well, that need to keep going, and some adjustments that need to be made. Because most of your athletes won't make a lot of adjustments unless you say something to them. And then you have a team without a lot of self-driven accountability. And so you have a team that's robbing itself of some of its potential. Because you don't have enough time in the day to sit with every single player and have a full kind of 30, 45-minute discussion after every practice and every single one of your 30-plus guys and all of your guys and gals that you're coaching. You just don't have enough time to be able to sit down. You're doing this well today physically. I did not like this physically in terms of skill execution. You continue to drop your elbow, or your rise ball's looking like this, or your free throw's looking like that, or you know what, you are not seeing the ball, just seeing the court well when you're penetrating the lane, and then talking about all the mental things that you can't, there's not enough time in the day for you to do that with every player. There has to be some self-driven accountability. If the team really is chasing excellence, they've got to be making these adjustments for themselves. So the take 2 actually helps to drive self-driven accountability. My recommendation is either go to the Dollar Tree, or because I spent a ton of time, I was telling you, your athletic director, that I got into town like 3 hours early, and the only place that I saw open was the Dollar Tree. So I spent 3 hours walking the aisles of the Dollar Tree. I bought more than I should have done. It's supposed to be cheap, but I think I need a second mortgage. I came up with bags and bags and bags of the stuff. But anyways, one of the things in the Dollar Tree is a $1.25, $1.50 for a cheap folder. They should each have a take 2 folder. At the very least, just answering these questions the best they can and doing that for every practice is getting them to think about their performance. So remember, going back to the previous things, they want to actually circle their top 3 strengths and their top 3 areas of improvement, add that to the top or the bottom of the take 2, and then do these 2 key questions every day. All right, let's talk about bounce back. So I want to get into a couple of skills. Not just introduce this plan of action, but actually talk about how do we move the needle on a couple of these areas that are very, very important. One of them is bounce back. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I truly believe that every player in America, including all of your players, can be divided into 2 categories, 2 very broad categories. Actually, one of them is broad, the other one's fairly narrow. The broad category, 90% of your athletes, 90% plus in this category. Elite ones, less than 10% over there. In this category, after a major mistake, bad throw, bad times, translate this to each of your respective sports. After that major mistake, they actually have immediately after, a little bit less poise, a little bit less focus, a little bit less confidence for the next play. Now you might say, well dude, that just kind of makes them human. And I agree, it does. Except for my elites. Less than 10%, all college athletes. Slightly higher in the pros, but still, even in professional ranks, some people get to the pros, they've got it all figured out mentally. It's actually not true. Some of them got there because they were just so darn talented, and they worked pretty hard, but they didn't fully have bounce back figured out. Watch a Major League Baseball game and an NBA game, if you doubt that for a second. Watch an NFL game, you doubt that for a second. But in this category, this is the special ones. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but after a major mistake, they can actually generate more poise, more focus, and more confidence than they actually had before the mistake. Think about that for a human being to be able to do that. How is that even possible? Do they actually exist? I'll give you one right now. And we're all old enough to, I think we're all old enough. I mean, we've got a mixture of ages here, but we probably all old enough to remember Tiger in his prime doing what? We all know how difficult it is to win a major in LPGA golf and PGA golf. What did Tiger do? Won all four. Back to back, to back to back. How stupid that is. How incredible. Blew my mind. I was just starting out my career, early 2000s. Just about lost the plot. I was like, how is this possible? Now, because a major's going to follow you around like an Oscar. Oscar winner Meryl Streep. Oscar winner Denzel Washington. You win a major, they're going to introduce you for the rest of your life. British Open winner, la la la. US Open winner, la la, you know. Masters, PGA Championship. It follows you around like a shadow in a positive way. You win all four, back to back to back to back. What? So I'm a young sports psychologist here, and I'm asking myself, how is this possible? And here's the stat that knocked me on my rear end. And if you think about it, it will knock you on your rear end too. Because I'm looking at the statistics and I'm reading about this and trying to understand it. The stat I read, in that year, it was slightly over a calendar year, in that time we won all four back-to-back. Tiger led the PGA Tour and women's professional golf, basically all professional golfers on planet Earth in this stat. He had the highest percentage of birdies immediately following bogeys. Digest that for a second. The highest percentage of birdies immediately following bogeys. There was him, and there was everyone else. Which means somehow, after he's at his worst, he can somehow galvanize his mental faculties and generate more poise and more focus and more confidence than he actually had before the mistake or the piece of bad luck or adversity that actually led to the bogey. Tiger calls it his Tiger 10. There's a reason why when he was in his prime, very quickly the camera learned to pan away from him as soon as he would make a mistake. You know, because initially when someone makes a mistake, the camera's on them because they're looking for drama and reaction, that kind of stuff. But Tiger would F-bomb and create havoc, and then he would disappear into himself, and that wasn't great for ratings, you know, because so, you know, kids behind the ropes and so on and so forth. And some people need to blow off steam immediately after a mistake. I always think it's a mistake to do that externally for different reasons. I'm not hating on Tiger, I'm an admirer. But I don't like externally blowing off steam. Internally, if you're going to curse yourself a little bit, that's fine. And we're going to get into how you do that and how that should end up so that you don't spiral. But Tiger gave himself 10 steps following the mistake to recover. And in those 10 steps, he'll say whatever he wanted to himself. But that's discipline and focus. And I don't know Tiger's exact bounce back. I never worked with him. I wanted to, but I never got a chance to work with him. And so I don't know his exact mechanism. But I do know his swing thoughts. I got that from a very reliable source. So I don't know his exact mechanism, but I know a lot that was going on in his brain. Not everything, but a lot that was going on in his brain. It's pretty special. And I'll talk about that in just a second. So how does it look in the other category? Calmness, well, you kind of know this. Let's talk about real athlete. And I've said many, many, many times now, so you know I'm not hating on the dude. But I've never played this guy in the NBA, and I'm talking about a player who did play in the NBA, so I'm not trying to hate on him. Because overall he had, in the grand scheme of his entire career, a good career. Good career. Played at Illinois, got picked up by a young expansion franchise called the Orlando Magic. And they also won the draft rights to two very, one would have been a generational guard, but he got hurt, Anthony Hardaway. And the other one, the Diesel, Superman, Shaquille O'Neal. And where does the Orlando Magic find themselves in 1995? In the NBA Finals for the first time. And it's the end of the game. Pivotal game 1 for momentum. And Orlando's up 3. And the ball's in Orlando's hands. But it's not in Anthony's hands, Hardaway. And it's not in Shaq's hands. It's in Nick Anderson's hands. And here's this young man who's one of the team's best shooters going to the free throw line for 2 shots. Now 10 ticks for any basketball coach, any basketball player is a long time in basketball. 10 seconds, a long time. But there is a good chance that if he can get 1 of 2, the team's in a very good position. Because it's still a 2-possession game for the opponents, and they've got to either get a quick 2 and hope to get possession for another 2, or they're going to get a 3. And maybe something can happen, but the team's up 3, and Nick goes to the free throw line. And if I'm standing in this category, you know it's not going to be a happy ending, right? Shot number 1. Brick. Steps off. But everyone knows Nick's a pretty good shooter. He's got shot number 2 here. And he pulls a shot. Pulling a shot in basketball is the worst thing you can do when you don't fully follow through. You actually just pull your shot. The trajectory is so flat, it hits the front of the rim on fairly flat, unbelievably bounces back towards the free throw line, where Nick Anderson is actually able to grab the ball, and he gets mobbed by the Houston Rockets. Few seconds go off the clock, now down to 4 or 5 seconds. Nick Anderson goes back to the free throw line for 2 more shots. Shot number 3. Worst brick yet. Nick Anderson hits his chest, starts smiling. Not a good sign, it looks like false bravado. Goes to the line for shot number 4. It's 4th shot in a row. And finally, after all those shots, I'm just kidding, he misses the 4th. Worse still, Houston gets the rebound, race down the floor, outlet the ball to Kenny, the Jet, Smith, guy that does the TNT shows with Barkley and Shaq. Kenny elevates, splash, ices the 3. Overtime, Houston takes the game, momentum, they sweep the series. So why am I saying this? Just because a guy missed 4 free throws? A guy who is a high 70s, 80% free throw shooter. What did he shoot the following year? Not in one game. What did he average the following year? 48%.
Why?
That's pretty bad. The press, including the press in Orlando, picked up on it. They called him Nick the Brick. It's not very kind. And in later life, after he kept saying, in the midst of his, the bravado, and every NBA player, just like any major league player, NFL player, NHL player, got pride and got an ego and trying to protect it with the press. And I'm fixing things are right. No, I'm really not thinking about last year. Absolutely thinking about last year. And in later life, after he retired, he said, I could never get the idea of being a choker out of my head. And as a guy that I really admire, because he played in the NBA, I didn't. He was a good shooter, and he still overall had a productive career. But they would actually go away from him at the end of games so they wouldn't put him on the free throw line. And as much as they joked with each other in the Orlando Magic, as a young team, and they had, the NBA on a string almost, because they were supposed to be the franchise of the future, they would always say, don't go there. You could joke about anything, joke about each other's girlfriends, the cars that you drive, yeah, your whip's beat up, and your girls this, the girl. But the one thing they would never joke about was that with Nick, because it was that sensitive. And my point in sharing that is not to be all doom and gloom and stress and strife, but to drive home a couple of really real life examples of human beings who were very gifted, and one had an actual legitimate mental bounce back routine in his head, and the other didn't, despite the fact that he was a very gifted athlete. I mean, Nick could do it all. He could take you inside, outside. He was a strong body. I really respect his game. But in this area, despite the talent and all the hard work, whether it was too much pride or he didn't have access to someone who could actually help him, you know, it does break my heart. You know, I've worked with a couple of players who are now managers in Major League Baseball, and you know the thing that ended their careers as players, they struggled with what's called sports-related conversion disorder. You know, that's a sports psychologist's way of talking about the itch sort of thing. And so on their way up, as they were in the affiliate level, and you know, and they were soft tossing occasionally, they would get yippy, and I'd end up getting a call because they couldn't actually just soft toss. And how embarrassing that is for, you know, a guy who's a, you know, my hitting coordinator or a pitching coordinator, and is having to pinch in and soft toss, you know, on his way. And, you know, one or two are now, you know, major league managers or coaches, and how embarrassing that was for them, and it ended their career. And you know, it's a man-made cause, and it's a man-made fix. You can actually do things to sports-related conversion disorder. Different conversation, different day, but it's actually, they just weren't getting the right help. They weren't actually getting the right help. And it ended their career. And for Nick Anderson, you know, this is the thing that followed him around. And yet, as coaches and trainers, we can actually teach them a bounce-back mechanism and understand what a bounce-back mechanism does. Always remember, routines do two things. One, they help with 4 C's, which is great. So that aspect of poise and focus and confidence, and you know, so their composure, concentration, confidence, commitment. That's great for routines. They help with that. But the other thing they do is they occupy the mind in the moment and prevent it from time travel. That occupation is as important, if not more so, than the actual impact on the 4 C's. And as coaches and trainers, our ability to teach these routines are important. So let's talk about this routine. Let's talk about the 3 F's. So the first F, flush. Each one of your athletes will run their best, pitch their best, shoot their best. Connect this to each of your respective sports. Each of them will perform their best at a certain level of emotional arousal, which is perfect for them and their personality. You have 30 players, you're going to have some 3s on that team, some 8s and 9s that are like really tightly wound, and actually do genuinely pitch and hit their best at an 8 or 9. Some are tightly wound, they've got no business being at an 8 or 9 emotionally. Their personality is more better fitted for a 5 or a 6. Same thing with each of your respective athletes that you coach. Some of them are unaware of where they're supposed to be. And if that's the case, unfortunately, a couple of coaches that heard this earlier, all they're going to be then is thermometer athletes. What do thermometers do? Reflect the environment, unfortunately. Big game, all that heat, all that energy, teammates are all like hyped up, and you're hyped up as coaches, and the crowd's going nuts. And unfortunately, if you're a thermometer athlete, you just reflect the environment. So imagine in terms of your emotional arousal, and you've got your 3 best pitches. You've got your 2-seam cut, and you've got your slider, and you've got your curveball, and you're overhyped. Meaning based on you and your personality, the amount of emotional arousal that you're currently experiencing is too much, causing a fight or flight reaction in the body, meaning that pitch is not going to come out as it did when that dude was throwing that side or in the pen. It ain't gonna look like the same. Same thing with the swing. Translate that for each of your sports. It's just not gonna be the same. If they are overhyped, every athlete has an ideal hype number. If the athletes don't know, then they're just thermometer athletes. They won't know how to get to where they need to be. Some of them are actually mistaken where they think the more fiery they are. You know, again, I was talking to Coach earlier, it's like trying to hold on to water with a clenched fist. The more you tighten that fist, the less water you can hold on to. For some of them, they actually need to bring their height number down, and they're not even aware of it. They think they play their best. My freshman year, I thought I was an 8 as a point guard. I wasn't. It's like a 6.5. So there I'm thinking, because that's how I was taught, you know, to be fiery, it shows commitment and so on, which it does, and I wasn't a bad kid. But it wasn't how I executed my skills the best. And you might say, well, Spencer, then how do we know? How do we know where each athlete needs to be? Well, if they think back to the best 3 games of their career, best 3 races, best 3 meets, of their career, where were they on that scale of 1 to 10? 2, 9, 6, and take that average, they'll be pretty darn close to their ideal height number. And then from that point on, that knowledge, their mission in life is to get there and stay there no matter what. Now to be able to do that, got to identify their triggers. Notice in terms of flush, fix, forget with the 3 Fs, we're still only on flush right now. Because if you mess up flush as an athlete, you're going to struggle with the other 2 areas and you won't properly bounce back. So this is all about maintaining and getting back to, after you've just embarrassed yourself, coaches, this is a very rudimentary, pedantic question to almost insult you, but humanly with an answer. After I've made a major mistake, which has made me really anxious now and tight, is my height number likely to increase after the mistake or what?
Decrease.
Well, it's actually counter to how you might think about this. We can, in terms of, don't get it twisted with like mood and motivation. That would likely decrease. But what is my anxiety level likely to do after an embarrassing mistake? Go up. And that's what we're talking about with hype. Don't get it twisted. Anxiety and emotional arousal, we're talking about elevation of those emotions. Don't get hype twisted with positive rah, I'm hyped up, and it's the level of emotional arousal that can be elevated through anxiety. And that's really important because after a mistake, I'm likely to unfortunately elevate my hype. And so I want to be able to get that hype number back down to where it's supposed to be based on me and my ideal levels. And I also have to be able to identify my triggers. I alluded to this earlier on. What are the 1 or 2 or 3 things for each of your athletes that if they happen, it's most likely to mess with their poise, which unfortunately will elevate their height number, their level of anxiety and emotional arousal. What are the triggers? And if they don't know, then they can't put that sheet of armor around their mind and actually protect themselves when these things happen. So a great team session is having players identify their own triggers, and be useful to have a list of like 7, 8, 9, 10 in your back pocket. So for example, guys, for some players it's going to be this, for some players it's going to be this, some players it's going to be this. There's all kinds of things that can happen. If players are struggling identifying their triggers, then ask them to do this. Think back to the worst 3 games of your career. I guarantee you there'll be a trigger or 2 that led to the downward spiral. What was that? Worst 3 games of your career. Was it what you brought to the game? Was it an aspect of mood? Was it a mistake? Was it how your coach spoke to you? Was it you thinking about your future, putting too much self-imposed pressure? What was the trigger? Every player has 1 or 2 or 3 triggers. And once you can identify them, then you can scenario plan. Remember Vera, Lassie Vera, 10,000 meter runner? Once you identify your triggers, you can actually begin to scenario plan them. So flushing is all about how quickly can they get back to their ideal height number. And if all else fails, remember the following phrase. It's easy for us to remember this as coaches and trainers. If you want to play big, breathe big. Don't take a little boy's breath, take a man's breath. That's a full, big belly breath from the deep diaphragmatic region. Don't take a little girl's breath, take a woman's breath. A big, deep belly breath from the deep diaphragmatic region. So if I was trying to maximize my hitting, and I'm your player and you're my coach, that starts for me when I actually see myself getting close to being up on the rotation, getting close to top step. Before I'm even on deck, I'm going to be starting my breathing cycle. I'm getting myself down to my ideal height number. Very rarely are they going to be so demotivated that they have to get themselves up. You might have 1 or 2 athletes who struggle to get themselves up to a certain height number. Lonely practices sometimes can do that too, where they're actually under height. That ain't good. They're going to need no show for the day. But for the most part, for competition, it's actually struggling with being overhyped because of the rigors of competition, the dangers of embarrassment, not living up to their own internal expectations, etc., etc., etc. So breathe big to play big. I shouldn't need to do this in too much depth, but I feel better for actually doing it and saying it out loud, for actually doing this. Peak performance breath is going to look like this. Watch my chest, watch my deep diaphragmatic region. I'm going to take a count, and I'm going to make it hard on myself. So if I really want to, if I'm in the dugout, and before I get to the top step, I want to go from a 3 count to an 8 count would be ideal. Because by the time I get to 7 or 8 count, I'm really beginning to slow my heart rate down, and I'm feeling relaxed. And that's just going to put some confidence, rocket fuel. Just feel good. You know when you feel good? It's just, there's a whole lot of things that just, the model of the 4 C's works like this, like a 3-legged stool. C, leg 1, leg 2, leg 3, composure, concentration, confidence, commitment. When one part of it's bolstered, the entire seat, the 3-legged stool is bolstered. If I take away one of those, obviously the integrity or balance of the stool is compromised, and there begins to be a negative domino effect. So when I get my composure really, really strong, it has a really, really good positive impact on the rest. If I lose one of these areas, just like a 3-legged stool, the thing's going to collapse very, very quickly. So just getting yourself composed is very, very important. And so, coach, you're going to make my life difficult. You're going to give me an 8 count. So I'm going to see if I can actually hit this without me running out of breath. So my goal is, I'm just going to breathe normally. And then when you start counting up from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, don't make it too easy on me. And I've really got to control my breathing. What you should actually see is the pit of my stomach move before I allow air into my upper chest. Make sense? When I'm exhaling, I should be able to do both at the same time. Just letting air out. There's no particular order. Seems a little weird, and if you try to breathe the first couple of times you do it, it just feels like it's backwards because you're so used to breathing, as adults, babies, they do it naturally. You watch them breathe, they don't care about what their belly looks like. You see that little belly go up and down, and adults, we actually care about what others think. I don't want people to see my belly pooch out, man. I'm just going to try and breathe, look cool, and look as attractive to everybody else on planet Earth as I possibly can. Now we've got it all twisted. So here I am. Not many sports psychologists will be your guinea pig for the day, and that's me. All right, so coach, and then when you get to 8, you're going to give me a countdown from 8. So I'm going right to the deep end.
So I'm going from 1 to 8.
Yeah, so it's going to be 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3. So don't make it awfully quick, just make my life easy, okay? So if I put 2 fingers on my umbilicus, you should actually see this move out before the chest. You guys see that? This is what you should see to that 8 count. See which move first? When you feel the pit of your stomach, the deep diaphragmatic region, it's like a massage for your core. So in track, coach will know all about transverse abdominis, pelvic floor muscles, deep diaphragmatic muscles, multifidi, the lower back. It's like giving everything a nice massage just by using a peak performance breath. Remind us, what's our goal here? Our goal is obviously more poise and to actually trigger something called the parasympathetic system. What's that fancy terminology actually mean? Think parachute. So if our sympathetic system is the thing that gets engaged, when we get all hyped up and for fight or flight, our parasympathetic system slows down our nervous system. Think parachute. And the easiest way to trigger our parasympathetic system to bring our hype number down is actually getting our heart rate and breathing patterns to slow down. And the more you can do it from the pit of your stomach, the better that goes. Everyone got it? Your athletes will not do this right the first time. Probably. Okay, it feels awkward the first few times you do it. By the way, part 1 of that 3-part free throw thing, big routine, breathing, imagery go to, exactly what I'm doing on the free throw line. Is that breathing? Do you think while I'm breathing, I'm actually focusing on score and putting the ball in? No. I'm just focusing on the movement of my belly, my deep diaphragmatic region, and my chest. That's all that matters to me on planet Earth. Because it's only nailing that, I give myself that grade when I walk off the floor. It's a very powerful thing, even as a human being, where you learn that kind of emotional regulation in life. And by the way, I ain't perfect at this, because if you ever see me behind the wheel with my wife in the car and I thoroughly embarrass myself and I get cut off in the strip mall, I feel this overwhelming sense of justice. I have to let them know with my horn that that was just completely selfish. And what do they do in return? They'll look at you angry like you were at fault. Why? This is Psych 101 for us, because anger is the feeling that prevents you from feeling the feeling you're really supposed to be feeling. As opposed to embarrassment, human beings don't do well with embarrassment. It's a defensive emotion, makes them feel weak. They use an offensive emotion that makes them feel in control. That's why people get so angry so quickly. Anger is the feeling that prevents you from feeling the feeling you're really supposed to be feeling as a human being. All right, I feel like I need to write you guys a counseling check after that to get that out of my system. I'm just trying to say I'm a work in progress here. I'm trying to be a good example for you, but I ain't perfect. All right, so, coach, whenever you're ready.
All right. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000, 5 1,000, 6 1,000, 7 1,000, 8 1,000.
I wish I had a heart rate monitor. I showed my Garmin. That would have probably taken a beat or two off of my resting heart rate. Imagine how empowering that is for one of your athletes before he even hits top step. Things slow down. Even the cadence of your voice begins to slow down. Very empowering. So remember, a big routine when you're locked into it just keeps you in the present. So with flush, the goal is breathe big, play big. Part of flush is getting that out of your system. Remember what I said with Tiger. Some athletes actually need to express some frustration versus having a kumbaya, let's all meditate kind of crap. The way I reject that. Some of them actually need to be angry in their mind. Dude, I cannot freaking believe I did that. Right here, right now, seriously, dude? And it's okay if they want to curse themselves up and down in their mind, but they have to finish the sentence by being their own best friend. That's the rule. Versus some athletes, when they get into the spiral, can't get out of the spiral, just down the spiral. So it has to be something like, dude, I can't believe I just did that. Seriously, in that situation, right here, right now, man, I am 10 times that guy. And I'm gonna bring the real me to the next play. I cursed myself up and down a little bit, but I ended that sentence by being my own best friend. And once I do that, then I can get into my breathing sequence and bring my height number down. So understand, different people might need that pressure cooker valve. Have you ever seen a pressure cooker? And that valve can actually save that thing from being a major explosion in the kitchen, obviously. With all that pressure built up, the pressure valve just releases the steam. Fix. Flush, fix, forget. The fix part of the 3 F's. We want to be able to replay that motor pattern or that sequence, and we want to be able to play it in terms of what we wanted to actually do, what we should have done. Now, I want to make this clear. With imagery, which is as old as the hills, if imagery is done correctly, it should be banned in sports. I really believe that. It's that strong of an advantage, and so rarely used. It should be an illegal advantage, right up there with PEDs. It's that powerful. But most people don't even use imagery correctly. You know, for example, there's 2 camera lens angles you can have in your mind. You can see yourself perform as if you're in the bleachers watching yourself run or throw. You'd be in the stands watching yourself pitch. That's outside the game looking in. That's called an outside in view. The other view you can have is if you're actually in the middle of the game and everything you see is from the vantage point of being inside the game looking out at the world. That's called an inside-out view. Which one of those 2 views, coaches, do you think is more powerful and why? You can't do a coin flip on me, 50-50, but got to try to justify it.
I think it's the outside view looking in.
Interesting.
Because you are basically a spectator watching yourself or watching that person perform the way that you would expect that they would perform at a high level.
Okay. That's justified as well. Any other thoughts?
The other one.
Inside out.
Inside out.
Why, coach?
Because you're in the moment.
Okay.
In that moment, you get to feel everything that's happening. You think about repetition, like the free throws, you know?
Yeah.
You get to justify and objectively look and say, was everything right? You know, you get to feel it. So as you get another rep, you could fix whatever it is and keep moving forward. Try to get to where you perfect it, per se.
Also very well justified. It was an unfair question because there's partial right and partial wrong. I think it stimulates some conversation. But when you're acquiring skill for the first time, outside in is more valuable because you can see the whole wind up, the entire movement. If I'm a pitcher, you know, I can't actually see what my hips are doing. You know, if I'm seeing in my mind from an inside out perspective, right? When you're acquiring skill, it's useful to see the whole thing, like a golf swing, the whole thing developing. But when you are fixing a mistake, the other answer is correct. In that circumstance, an inside-out view will lead to a higher percentage chance of mirroring or reciprocating that image after a mistake. Meaning that if you activate your senses, hearing, vision, touch, taste, smell, and you see an image from an inside-out image, because it's the actual same image you'll see when you're actually playing the game, you're actually pitching, you're actually hitting, the actual view you have in real life is going to be inside out. So that's exactly the image that you want to fix, because when you experience the image, when you experience the real life version of it, it's going to be from exactly the same camera angle as you just had in your head. Does that make sense, Coach? Mm-hmm. So if you're acquiring skill, if I'm teaching a guy a new version of a pitch, I want him to first see that pitch and the whole sequence from an outside in. But once that skill, that motor pattern begins to get closer to automatic, and what happens there, without sounding too scientific, we make a transition in our brain from an area called the cerebral cortex, our thinking part of the brain, to our cerebellum, like a plum-sized area in the back of the brain, where automatic skill execution occurs. And I definitely want to be touching on, before we close, the difference between think box and trust box, by the way, and what that does to individuals. Skill execution versus tweaks for skills, and what we should be thinking about in those situations. But in terms, to keep things simple, in terms of fixing, we always want to use an inside-out view. Skill acquisition, that's why it's a trick question. Skill acquisition, outside in, until the skill's automatic. So when we're fixing, the goal is to see exactly what should have occurred. Repair that free throw in your mind, and feel your way through the free throw. So I'll give you a good example of this. Play along with me, coaches, if you would. I've always known that you don't have to be a great coach. You don't have to have played sports at a high level. But I know most coaches have played sports previously. So if you have, think back to one of your favorite skills that you actually used to execute. If you're a pitcher, your favorite pitch. If you're a runner, thrower, what you used to do. And I want you to think about when you're at your best and see yourself from an inside-out perspective. It's harder. It's a much harder viewpoint than outside in, but an inside-out perspective. And I want you to actually see yourself performing that skill. First, do it in slow motion. It's much easier to execute doing it in slow motion. Try not to switch too much between outside in and inside out. Just try to stay inside out. Get the color and the brightness and the contrast of where you're at just right, the court or the field or the track, whether it's home or away. Now execute the skill again in slow motion and feel your way through that skill. Use that spatial awareness, that kinesthetic sense to feel your way through the movement without needing to move your body at all. Just feel your way through the skill. Get the sounds right, the brightness, the color, the contrast. Feel your way through the skill. Now do it real time, as if it's real speed, real life speed. Brightness, color, contrast, sound, and feel your way through that skill. Very good. And give me your eyes, please, coaches. That's exactly how your athletes need to execute that fix. What does it do? I'm about to get scientific on you. Just a few seconds. When we execute a motor pattern, we have a synapse that occurs in our brain. What's that? It's two neurons and an electrical signal that's passed from one neuron to the next via a neurotransmitter. Heck's that. Think of it like a river. Neurotransmitter is a brain chemical release, like a boat that will go on a river. The neurotransmitter actually carries an electrical signal along that neurotransmitter, and it synapses with another neuron. And then what happens? We select a motor pattern like a filing cabinet in our brain. That signal travels down our spine, And the synapses with a motor pattern, a motor neuron in our body when we execute the skill. Now, why did I just share that? To show off some scientific knowledge? Nope. When you use imagery correctly, an inside-out image, and activate all of your senses, do you know everything I just described actually takes place? That's why I say it should be illegal. Should be banned. Unfair advantage. There's so few athletes, even for coaches who have heard of visualization and imagery, it's just old and cliched. Oh, what do they do in mental skills? Goal setting and imagery. Yeah, talks about those two things, right? But very few people actually use imagery where they actually get to have that neurological and biological process actually transpire. You know, all of that just occurred. When you were thinking about that skill, if you were doing that correctly, all of that occurred in the body. What is that? That's called a free rep. Can you imagine what the World Series would look like if an actual hitter just said, okay, give me a practice one. Mr. Pitcher, just want to groove my swing. What that would do for hitting percentages, pretty darn good for hitting percentages, right? You get to groove an actual motor pattern or repair the other one. Does it guarantee perfection on the next play? Nope. Does it give you the highest percentage chance of mirroring or reciprocating that energy? Yes. And then we go one step further. Here's another thing that it does. If you've ever had an argument with someone who was behaving very irrationally and unreasonable, they got emotional, you got emotional, and if your own emotions were compromised, you probably weren't thinking at your best. I always tell human beings, try to avoid any conversations in a meaningful halt. If either you're feeling overly hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, okay, they're two good things. And for athletes and ex-athletes, man, you deprive us of carbs, man. We're not good human beings, right? So hungry, angry, lonely, tired, it's crazy. But understand too that to prevent yourself from having those type of conversations is not always avoidable. And when you do have them, sometimes you'll finish with the conversation. You want the best version of yourself, you got emotional. Only when you get away, your emotions start settling down, and you're like, oh, if I would have said this, and I said that, I could have actually, just that would be the right thing to say in the moment. I could have put them in their place and that would have ended that. And only when you're really upset about a conversation, only when you figure out, in that same circumstance, I'm gonna say this, you finally actually be able to forgive yourself a little bit and lay it down. It's a weird thing at how human beings act. Even when you didn't give the best version of yourself, say, I know, I can now analyze why that happened, and here's what I would do next time. It's another thing that imagery does. For a basketball player, you're shooting a three, you don't get your legs into the shot adequately. That shot, which should be a 3-point shot, should feel like a six-foot shot, a 3-foot shot. It's no different. All it changes is the legs and the kinetic energy, potential energy, and then kinetic energy from your legs, and it makes the same motion the same at 3 feet versus 6 feet versus 10 feet. You watch Steph Curry shoot a three, get his legs fully into the shot. It looks like it could be a 3 or 4 foot shot. The actual action up here doesn't change. The only thing that happens is the power development, potential energy, creating kinetic energy, and making this so much more powerful. But this action doesn't really change at all. Free throw, 3-foot shot, 3-point shot, doesn't change much at all. You don't get your legs into it, you're gonna end up pushing that ball, almost like a shot ball. It feels off, it just feels wrong for a basketball player. My point in sharing that, when you're running back on defense and you actually think about what you did wrong and actually correct it in your mind, it's so much easier to lay that mistake down. So understand, correct imagery does two things for us. It corrects the motor pattern, gives us the best chance of success on the next play, and also kind of emotionally allows us to lay it down a little bit. So when we're talking about fix, it's much more than just saying, I recognize what I did wrong. There's an in-depth process to fixing the play. Coaches, do you know how different this sounds than, hey, it's over, next play? Versus having a flush, fix, and then forget. So where does forget come into play? Can we hard erase our minds like computers just turning off? Actually, even computers now, they just save work automatically. When I was in college, man, you didn't hit that save button, man, it was over. Or you had that power outage.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Well, I tell you, man, I say coach, but young man, I would say this. You had a power glitch, you heard groans across the campus.
Oh.
Right, because when you're in a computer, we had computer labs right back then. You had a computer lab at the power glitch, and you hadn't saved your work. There was no autosave, right? So it just hard erased everything from the RAM of the computer. You lost like the 18-page document, gone, gone.
Yeah.
Everything gone.
I use it.
You're kidding me, right?
No, I'm not kidding you. So
A lot of 23.
I still
So-
worry that's gonna happen.
I just let it go.
I know it's blunt force trauma. I do the same thing. I go up my little arrow and I'm hitting save like just every like 10 seconds. It was trauma. It's traumatic.
Terrible.
Absolutely traumatic. So this, our minds are unfortunate. They don't work that way. You can't hard erase them. You can't hard erase RAM. But I can get you right the second place right behind that. You know, versus actually hard erasing a mistake from one of your athletes. And that is occupying their minds so they don't overly shift and think about the consequences of a mistake. How do we do that? At the tail end of the image, they should have a go-to set of words or a sentence which is pre-written, pre-created. Now I want to be careful as I say go-to words, go-to sentence. You should always emphasize the things you are attempting to do versus not attempting to do. Now, what does that mean exactly? Let me explain. If I'm a pitcher, it doesn't sound so bad to say, man, I ain't walking another dude. I'm confident, I'm making a statement to myself, I'm not gonna do this anymore. Sounds positive on the surface, it's not. I mean, most seasoned coaches will know it's negative, it's actually negative. Why? Because it's just like I said, if your coaching career depended on the following, and a $250,000 raise depended on the following, whatever you do not think of a Coca-Cola can in your mind right now, don't you do it. Don't you see the shape of the can? Don't you see the color red? Don't you see the C of that beautiful swirl of the Coca-Cola logo? Don't you do it. See anything except a Coca-Cola can in your mind. For some of you, during that time, even if it was just for half a second, you may have had a Coca-Cola can image flash in your mind. Why? Because it's a law of dominant thought. It means your brain and body does not always distinguish between do and don't do. So why would I ever say, if I'm a golfer, I'm not gonna go beach on this one, man. I'm gonna, anything but the water and the beach, and all of a sudden I find myself in the sand trap. I'm like, I just told myself not to. It's the strangest thing. I noticed that first as a basketball player, that there was times when my coach gave me the green light to shoot through on a break, and I'd come down on the break before I understood all this. Only later did I really understand what was going on in my mind. But at the time I was like, if you ever shoot an uncontested three on the break, I don't know why you'd think this, because of the embarrassment factor to say if it's uncontested, there'd be no excuse for an air ball. So I'd say anything but an air ball. Sometimes, myself, an air ball. And I was like, how did that happen? The law of dominant thought, your brain and body does not always distinguish between do and don't do. So always give it a positive command in terms of what you intend to do versus what you're trying to avoid. There's a difference. So I can tell myself on the free throw line, so smooth, so consistent. Positive command, I'm trying to avoid anything at all, versus I'm trying to avoid missing, and I don't even want to give myself an unrealistic positive command. So I don't want to say, oh, I make every clutch shot. I make every clutch shot. That sounds positive, not realistic. Remember, I could be perfectly mentally perfect in terms of the 4 C's, but physically not execute. So in that situation where I'm telling myself, I make every clutch shot, it is positive, but it's not realistic. What happens the first time I actually miss in the clutch then? What happens to that? I'm gonna have to start having a conversation. What was that? What do you mean, what was that? You told yourself you never miss in the clutch. You told yourself you make them all in the clutch. Well, I normally do, but that's not what you said to yourself. You said you make them all in the clutch. I don't really have a sideline conversation about the truth and the veracity of what I'm telling myself. Keep it positive, but keep it realistic. Speak to yourself in a warm. Treat yourself like your own best friend. Warm, friendly voice. So for me, my 2 go-to sentences, as an example, so smooth, so consistent. Love these situations. So smooth, so consistent. I love these situations. That can all be true and all positive. Completely true, completely realistic, completely positive. Now, talking about flush, height number, breathe big to play big, how we fix and how we forget. Now you're beginning to understand, for some of you, can you imagine those 8 to 9 to 10, 11, 12 seconds? I'm not only doing something great for my mind and body, I have completely occupied my mind and I'm in my own freaking world of bounce back elite. versus what most athletes do after a mistake. They start externally processing. What did that mean? What did that look like? How have I choked? What does that mean for the game? Occupy players' minds in the clutch. Pre-play and post-play, particularly under pressure. And post-play invariably is going to involve the 3Fs and those mistakes. Now, how would I, if I was a coach, how would I teach this tomorrow? I would not teach the 3Fs. I would just teach flush. And have my players just go out there and see how good of a job they can do just to engage their system to slow down their thoughts and slow down their heart rate and breathing patterns after every mistake. Day 2, just focus on fix, nothing else. We'll have a small team session about how imagery works and activating senses. I'll start them off slow motion, just 5 or 10 minutes. And then after every mistake, just work on a fix. 3rd day, you know where I'm going with this? I'm just working on my key go-to words, my go-to sentences. A very successful major league pitcher, I'll maintain confidentiality, but you guys aren't idiots. You'll know that there's a very good pitcher in Detroit. And in his mind, I love this one. Completely stole this from him. This is not me. I wish I could take credit for it. How easy can I throw hard? That's also often in the back of his mind in his wind-up. How good is that? That's so good. That's so very good. Stays relaxed when there's a 102, 103 on the clock. Whew, that's nice. Yep. So those key go-to words will be day 3. Day 4, flush and fix. Day 5, flush, fix, forget. In a week, they'll own the skill. But if they try to bite off more than they can chew, they're going to rush it in day 1, and it's going to be excuse the gray area language, a half-assed skill. We're going to do something. Let's do it well. Now, here's the challenge. Here's the struggle. I know we're just a minute or 2 away from finishing here. The challenge and the struggle is that you can hear this, and then the challenge and the struggle is now you've got to wrestle with it, because how do you put that in your words, your personality, your language, and present it in a little 5 or 10 minute team session in a way that comes out fluid and fairly confident? And that is something you'll need to just wrestle with a little bit. Wrestle with your notes a little bit, wrestle with your thoughts, come up with a little plan, and if you have to script it out, you have to script it out. No one's asking you to be a strength and conditioning coach, but as coaches, you need to know enough to be dangerous about that area. No one's asking to be a sports psychologist, but as coaches, it's at collegiate level, you need to be dangerous enough in that area. And that takes wrestling with it a little bit and coming up with a mini plan and how would I handle these 5 minutes. And I often use, when I'm working with teams, and this is halfway an unfair, crass pitch right in front of your athletic director, to say, if you ever want to bring me back for either part 2 of this or to work with your team, please get with your AD. If the funding's there, we'd love to come back and do that. But when I'm working with teams, I'll often give real life examples, because it adds a little bit of spice to the session. I'll have video clips and give some actual real life examples. You can absolutely do the same thing in your respective sports. It just makes it more meaningful and real. You can add a quote or 2 that's related to the mental game, just to bolster the importance of the mental game. There's ways you can build a really good team session for 10 or 15 minutes that involves a tiny bit of Q&A to get their thoughts on some of the things they do, and then teach a mechanism and have some real life examples and a couple of quotes, and bang, you've got a 10, 12, 15 minute segment that's really actually pretty darn good and way ahead of your competition. And you start piecing those together each week, once or twice a week, end up with a 3 or 4 or 5 months, and they're going to have some mental skills in their back pocket. But if I pick some low-hanging fruit for skills, this plan of action is very important. It's a great start. The inventory and the take 2. Bounce back is very important if I were to cherry pick some skills. And a massive one is understanding the expectations we take into competition. and particularly those related to outcome. And they'll fight you on that initially because of how much they are intricately tied to outcome based on their self-esteem and self-worth. And I get it. I don't blame them. Every Hollywood sports movie is connected to that. But teaching them what clutch really is. Giving them some actual examples of how you can be clutch and still end up with an out. And it's not just the cliched one, oh, you hard hit ball to third base or to the short. But it was a good at bat. I'm talking about even whiffing. You were poised, focused, confident. It's just a great freaking pitch. And there wasn't a whole lot you could do with that at that time. You slowed the game down, great pitch recognition. Good news for you. Not every pitcher is going to be able to do that with every pitch in every game. They're going to make mistakes, and when you bring that same mindset to the plate, you're going to punish them for that. But teach them about what is clutch and what is not. Very, very important. Very important. Before I close with one very quick example, I'll tell you one thing that I wish I could do for every major league pitcher. Wish I could do this. Wish I could do this to every runner. Black curtain either side of the lane. They don't evaluate based on competition. I know sometimes that can actually bring out the best in individuals, and I totally get that. But I wish I could drop this black curtain so the pitcher delivers the pitch. I wish I could drop a black curtain right in front of the pitch. Now I understand sometimes you've got to make a fielded play. It's a pitcher, right? But my point is that I wish they could just actually evaluate the pitch on the black curtain and say, tell me about that pitch. Like, dude, let me just see what happens. What did you do with it at the plate? No, that's not the definition of clutch. What did you take into that pitch from intentions? Intentions that go into the pitch. From a mental perspective is what actually determines whether that's clutch or not. If they get to at least start there, then they're onto something. They're onto gold. They're onto something really, really good. If they can begin to understand it's the intentions that go into a certain play that makes it clutch or not. Not whether I hit the free throw or not, but how well executed my routine is. What is actually going on with the 4 C's of my brain and body. That determines whether it's clutch. You will take one of the biggest unknowns and fears and threats out of their mind when you can do that. I'm not asking them to stop celebrating great outcomes. It's what makes sports fun. It's fun pursuing championships. That's all outcome oriented. I'm in love with that. I love that. It doesn't bring any value to me when I'm on the bottom of the pitcher. And that's why I always say the greatest in the game aren't fearless pitchers. They appear fearless. They're just focused. Their mind actually hasn't gravitated to consequences and outcome. They're just freaking locked into the present. That's great focus, not fearlessness. I'll say this. Number one, I'm extremely grateful for this young lady bringing me in, and you guys agreeing to this. I say this every single time, and I really mean it. This is what I'm passionate about. Give me a chance to share my passion with you. It means an awful lot, and have some good conversation. And you guys, it's late in the day for you. It's Sunday, and you've got lives and boyfriends, girlfriends, spouses, and and here you are. Well, some of us. Some of us have elite freedom. The cool thing is, though, there's a time where it's not as cool, man. That's the cool thing. There's a time where it's not as cool.
Yeah.
Even it's very hard to believe at times. Right?
Eventually,
yes, sir. But my point is that it's not lost on me, and you guys would choose to be here to develop yourselves. And I've learned this. I said in terms of knowledge and application earlier on that knowledge means nothing without application. And I told you how lucky I am. I've gotten to work with a couple 3 Hall of Fame coaches in their respective sports, and I've learned more from them than they ever learned from me as their sports psych guy. But I've learned that they didn't get there to the Hall of Fame because of what they knew and what they could do. And you might respond to say, dude, that's exactly why they're in the Hall of Fame, because of what they knew and what they could do. Nah, that's a big part of it. It's not the biggest part of it. They're not there because of what they knew, what they could do. They're there because their entire career was earmarked by this insatiable appetite to add to what they couldn't do and what they didn't know. Just thirsty. We're all works in progress. I hope 2 or 3 years from now I'm a markedly different sports psychologist to say, man, that dude's better than what he was when I saw him in 2025. He's improved, he's gotten better, he teaches this in a different way. And I hope the same is true for us. We're works in progress as coaches. And as coaches and trainers, we are shaping young minds, and I don't mean to be melodramatic here when I say that I don't think there's a more important job in the world. Saving lives and shaping minds. Two most important jobs on the planet. I'm not minimizing what it means to stack a shelf at Walmart or make a nice cup of coffee in Starbucks. I'm just saying that we have very, very important roles. And hopefully you can stand with me when we embrace our desire to be lifelong learners and add to what we don't know and can't do. And with that, you guys have my thanks, and hopefully in sometime in the future, if everything aligns, I know these things aren't free and budgets are not limitless. There'll be a part 2 for you guys if you want it. So thank you guys, God bless, and God willing, we'll see you guys again soon. Thank you.
Coaches, if you want to take any of this home, there's a few pieces here. If you want to take any of it with, please do. What's that?
I will.
I know. Take this, I'll get most of it on the way home.
Yeah, we need it. He needs it more than I do.
Where did you come from?
Wait, you should come over to my house. You should come over to my house. You probably think this is cold. This is freaking freezing.
I'm proud of him.
It was 78 degrees when I
Oh,
was
man.
Yeah, right? My wife was still cold.
That's okay. She was